Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live stream. This is the 46th, believe it or not, live stream that we've done, and I really appreciate so many people joining. There's loads of regulars here, and I'll come to you as I go through the questions. So the goal is it's live, 60 minutes, and I try and answer as many questions as I possibly can within the 60 minutes that we have. So we'll value your time, and we will make sure that we stick to that 60 minutes, although unfortunately we do sometimes run out of time just because of the questions. Before we get into the questions, I want to do one thing, which is I have been forgetting that every live stream I promise to give a shout out to people who've joined the channel as channel members. So let me just give a quick hi to these people who've joined in the last week onto channel membership. So great, thanks very much, appreciate that. If you ever want to find out about channel memberships, you'll find them below the video, a little link there. So let's get stuck into the questions, because before the live stream started, there was loads of people posting questions, asking questions, having a good chat about cruises they're doing, not doing. So let's get straight into the questions. And then a little bit later, I'll talk about plans for next week's live stream and so on. So let's get straight in. Eddie Blanche, as Princess Australia have cancelled cruising in the Southern Hemisphere until the 17th of March at the earliest, do you think of the cruise that I booked on the 13th of April will go ahead? Is month enough time? So for those of you who don't know, of course, Australia is just slowly looking at beginning to open their borders initially to Australians only, and then eventually sometime next year to international travelers. Not surprisingly, though, complete aside, the cost of flights out of Australia for Australians is astronomical. We're going to be in the US, and our really good friends who we normally spend Christmas with, and of course, because of the pandemic, haven't seen for a while, they were looking at getting some flights from Australia to Los Angeles way, and it was $8,000 Australian dollars. That's about 4,000 pounds, about $5,000-6,000 US dollars, just to get an economy flight there. So anyway, as a complete aside, sorry about that. So in terms of the timing, Eddie, a lot of it hinges, to be honest, with around what the Australians allow and don't allow, when they actually allow cruising to resume. So what the cruise lines say, certainly in the startups that happened around Europe, the US, UK, is the cruise lines say they need up to 12 weeks to actually get ships back into service. And of course, some of the ships are quite a long way from Australia. In fact, some of them are still in Europe, having come out of dry dock and been turned into princess ships. So a lot of it will hinge around when Australia gives an indication when they can start up, because they can then get crew back, they can get the ships back in place, they can do the training they need to do, they can do whatever quarantining is required, because most of the cruise lines are still requiring crew, despite the vaccinations, to have 2 weeks. So a lot of it hinges on that issue. So certainly I would say watch it, but if the Australians haven't been clear about the resumption of cruising by the end of this year into January, it's going to be very, very tight. But I guess they're what we know is the Australian government so far hasn't been particularly forthcoming in terms of having that discussion. So let's have so hopefully that answered that, Eddie. Louis or Lewis, Garrett, there's a two-part question here, so I'll come to them both. He's seen that MSC has changed the itinerary for December, getting rid of some ports, replacing them, and a second day at Ocean Key, which is of course, their private resort. And I saw that as well. They issued a press release on that. And what Louis wants to know is, they've made final payment. Do you know if you can get a refund due to a changed itinerary? Now, this is a pretty big issue. And I actually just have finished making a video, which will come out in a couple of weeks' time, around some of these areas in the contract. What you need to do, how's that, Louis? The key thing to do is have a little look at your contract. Now, normally in the cruise contract, cruise lines are actually allowed, or have the right in the contract when you book the cruise, the right to change itineraries both before and during sailings. Now, obviously during sailings, that's normally because there's a security issue on land, there's a weather issue or something like that. So I've been lots of cruises where we haven't been able to get into ports. Now, because this one counts potentially, I think you could argue, as a major change. So you normally find that most cruise contracts I've looked at say that you can only ask for some kind of refund if the cruise line considers it to be a significant change. So you may find under the contract you can't, or you don't have many legs to stand on, but I think you probably can argue it's a significant change. And certainly I would try and take that approach if you don't want to go to those ports. But you may well find in the cruise contract, which if you haven't seen it, because you probably haven't, it's buried back in the back of the brochures, or you can normally find it on the website, or if you book through an agent, ask them to check. So you may find that you're going to struggle, but I would argue for significant change. Hetty, good to see you. Hetty's off on the Rotterdam out of Port Everglades next week. The Rotterdam, of course, now sailing it does look a magnificent ship, and I look forward to definitely following how that goes. Jeffrey, good to see you, Jeffrey. And I got a little alert here somewhere, linked also to the channel membership thing. Here we are. You've been a member for 4 months, so good for that, Jeffrey. Good to see you here live again. So with the resumption of cruising, many lines are reducing loyalty privileges. Is there a trend in industry to move away from this perk, or just an attempt to improve short-term financials? So Jeffrey, I haven't actually seen much of that happening. You've obviously picked up something, I'm guessing, probably particularly related to Princess, because I know you've been looking at Princess, and I've got a Princess cruise coming up quite in the beginning of December, 4th or 5th of December. I haven't spotted any of that. I haven't seen any of that. So I will take a look at that. But if other people have seen that, it'd be good to perhaps post that. I'm guessing if it's happening, it's either because they're aligning across the industry, or probably, as you say, more likely just try to improve financials. But I certainly haven't seen that as a trend. So it may be more specific. So I'll certainly keep a lookout for that and do a little bit of ferreting around and see if I can come back with anything much more on that. Beth's back after 2 weeks. Good to see you back. What did you miss? Everything. It was you missed everything. It's been everything, I'll just say. Now, I think I actually seen, Wilfred, that Lou, good to see you, Lou, has actually answered this question. We're set to go on a cruise in January on Carnival out of New Orleans. Do you know if vaccinations are required or just proof of a negative test? Now, I think Lou's actually answered this. Wilfred, I don't know 100%, but what I have seen is many of the cruise lines are extending the vaccination rules, certainly for non-Florida sailings, and the various PCR testing. So I think Lou has answered that with vaccinations and proof of a negative test within 48 hours. But certainly most of the Carnival Corporation ones have extended. I think I mentioned before that I've got a Holland America trip in January, which is actually going out of Florida, and Holland America have extended their vaccination approach to that, and certainly non-Florida states are doing that. So thanks for answering that question there, Lou. Peter saying he just disembarked Iona. If anyone wants to ask anything, magnificent ship. And I think someone pointed out it's Emma. Remember, Cruises has been on there. She had quite a lot of postings on Instagram stories on that. So quite a few people doing that. So let's keep on going through. So Beth, hi Beth, back to you, Beth. Boarding Region 70's Explorer in 2 weeks and 2 days. Fantastic news. I really want to experience Region 70's. I get asked about it a lot. I know for many people it's a really big favorite. And I've actually toured Explorer but haven't cruised an Explorer. And I'm certainly looking at trying to line up a Region 7C cruise to have a great trip. Lou's asking the question, how many days for your next cruise? Ours is 54 days. And if I remember correctly, Lou, your next trip, I think, is probably on Oceania. So I'll answer this question and give people a bit of an update as well. So my next cruise is actually now, I think, in 10 or 11 days time, something like that. Maybe a little bit long, maybe I'm flying in 10 days time, which is, of course, to join Ponant and go on Antarctica. And that's certainly now looking extremely likely because the ship is on its way. It's left, it's now sailing. It's gone past Tenerife and it's sailing away. It's due to arrive in Montevideo on the 12th of November, which is when I'm due to join it. Uruguay have finally confirmed that they are opening their borders. So certainly that's my next cruise. And I posted a little thing in the community tab, which I really appreciate. People are really very interactive on the community tab. I don't know how many of you use community tab, but I certainly try and post everything 1 or 2 days there after lots of surveys and quizzes and things. But I posted about Antarctica and what people want to know. And there was lots and lots of suggestions and comments around things that people would like to know. So if you do have anything you want to add to that, if you just take a look at the community tab, go to my channel, Tips for Travelers channel. If you look on community and have a look there, you'll see some other surveys you may want to do. But there's a thing there around Antarctica. So it'd be great if you add that as I start to plan what I'm going to do around Antarctica, because I've got some videos around Antarctica, but I need to really think about what I can do that's new and different and kind of interesting. So that's very, very interesting. Matt Pfeiffer, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Absolutely. We're doing Viking Sky out of Athens in 3 weeks. Looking forward to the cruise as well as Christmas markets and Heidelberg Glühwein all around. So fantastic. It's good to see. I mean, it'd be very interesting to know, Matt. I'm not sure if you're a frequent Viking or not, but certainly that Viking Sky out of Athens will be a great trip, and certainly it's going to be very interesting exploring the islands this time of the year because it's kind of out of the season, and so things will be much quieter and stuff. So it should definitely be a pretty interesting approach, time of the year to go. Andy and Kirsty here, good to see you as always. Here we go. Liz, hi there, Liz. Coming up for final payment on Emerald River Cruise, Amsterdam to Bucharest. Wow, that's a fantastic trip because you're going the whole way. I guess that must be 2 weeks, maybe a bit less than that. And you're going to see both the classic part, and you're also going to get to see that part of sort of Eastern Europe where we had all the Balkan War and all that stuff. Very, very interesting. So nice mix of history and modern history. So certainly it's very early for final payment. I actually did Emerald River Cruise, by the way, but I did it from Bucharest to Budapest, and they were only running that part. So Emerald's a great cruise line. I hope you enjoy that. So yes, I think it's pretty extremely likely that they will run. I mean, they are running now this season. There's been many ships running relatively without too many hassles. They haven't even had water level issues, which is always one of the challenges: too much water, too little water. So I think you should be pretty confident that they're running. Of course, as you know, or as you may not know, but certainly through some of those countries that you will be going, there currently are relatively strict restrictions on going into public places, restaurants, bars, museums, and so on. It varies country by country, where you have to show the EU green passport or equivalent. So if that's still in place, I mean, that may by April not still be in place, but one of the watch outs is just make sure as you get close to that, beside all the usual passenger locator forms and vaccines, not vaccines, blah, blah, blah. But that's something to keep on top of, is what is going to be required from that particular side of things. So let's have Viking. Lots of love for Viking. Lots of people done Viking. Lots of Viking lovers here. Robert from Canada, Norwegian Bliss. Lots of people got cruises. It's very interesting actually to have a look at how many people are posting that they've got cruises coming up, because certainly when I did various surveys and even on the live stream, talking to people, is the amount of people who'd actually physically booked cruises wasn't as many as you would expect. And a lot of people obviously watching this channel, come to live streams, are big cruising fans, and it's great to see so many people are now getting comfortable going back, and particularly going back with long haul. So this is going to be my first my second cruise, and this first long haul cruise, and juggling all those COVID tests. So I've got it because of the time scale. I've got to have a COVID test to go into Uruguay, which has a certain time requirement. I think it's 72 hours. It looks like it's going to be. We're just waiting for the final thing to come out. But you've also got to have one to board the ship. So effectively, I've got to do one to make sure I can get into Uruguay. But then just to be 100% sure that's within the time scale with time difference, I've got to do one on the day that I'm flying to make sure I've got that. So it's all that kind of juggling around thing. Gary's making a point, which I assume I might have missed something. Hi there, Gary. Gary is a travel agent that many people on the channel have worked with. Not for the third person sharing a cabin misses out on promotions. I think that was the point, I guess, we've seen where there's been a number of kind of discounts, promotions, where only the two, because it's basically it's originally on double occupancy, are some of the promotions and incentives are only linked to those. We've got someone from Singapore, so let's think. It must be quite late at night there. I guess you're about 8 hours ahead. So thanks. I've seen lots happening in Singapore with changes. One of the things you may have also seen is in Hong Kong, one of the Royal Caribbean ships, they picked up a couple of weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, one COVID case amongst one crew member, and the Hong Kong authorities made everyone just embarked the ship, a couple of thousand people. They made everyone disembark, go through testing, and they stopped future sailings. And last I saw, Royal Caribbean was still trying to get those sailings. As far as I'm aware, Richard, because I've been listening to some people on various podcasts and things, as far as I'm aware, the Singapore cruises to nowhere are still going despite all of those kind of restrictions. Lucy's mum's here, Alabama, Sharon from Alabama, Haiti Vale, and so on. So let's have a look. Barry. Hi, Barry. I know Barry has been talking a lot about moving, and I think both, I think I'm right saying Barry, and sort of on social media and also on here, but maybe I'm getting confused, talking about the various transatlantics, US opening, etc. So Barry is on Regal Princess to Fort Lauderdale with the second UK EU cruise ship in Fort Lauderdale after the October the 8th rule change. Both got boosters today. UK R number, fingers UK R number up. Fingers crossed, rules don't change. So certainly yes. For those people who probably don't know, is November the 8th is the day that the US is opening to vaccinated travelers from a number of countries. Is it 30 countries, including the UK? So it does mean, although some cruise lines, I guess, had cancelled the transatlantics for EU and UK travelers, some are now allowing that to go ahead. So I think both Regal and Sky are doing, because I know a few people on the Sky transatlantics, which is really tight in terms of timing. But you're right, the numbers are all over the place at the moment. Both the UK numbers are growing in Europe, numbers are growing in the US. So it's going to be interesting to see whether we see those those fluctuating change. But hopefully, I think with the vaccinations and stuff. What's interesting, as an aside, just being on Barry's point about the boosters, it's very interesting because what I've noticed is none of the countries in their requirements currently are including boosters. So every country I've looked at so far, and including over to the US, my situation with Uruguay, is vaccination is still being counted as the two-dose regimen, or if you've had the J&J one-dose regimen. None of them are currently referring to boosters at all as part of the vaccination requirement. So it will be interesting. I think we spoke about this in the last live stream. It'll be interesting to see as things evolve, as more people have boosters around the world, so in the Western world, the whole separate debate about what's happening in Africa and so on. But will boosters become part of the system? So, for example, I think it was Austria had brought in a rule which spoke about you had to have had your dose within a certain time period. So actually people in the UK who'd had very early vaccinations, like in the December, January time, like my mum had done with her second one, whenever that was, is almost those were expiring. And so the booster then becomes important. As another complete aside, while we're talking about the role of boosters, so we'll have to see how that evolves, is Uruguay. Sorry to keep going on about Uruguay, but what's interesting is Uruguay very far ahead, it seems, in terms of percentages of people vaccinated. It's right up, I think, in the 80%. But they have spoken about it. I don't know if it's going to happen, but they were talking about offering boosters to foreign tourists coming into the country. So that was quite interesting. On that whole vaccination policy, because I see there has been a little bit of discussion around vaccination policies. I think you're absolutely right, Elaine. We haven't seen any lines shifting or planning to shift on the vaccination policy. What we have seen is them pushing that into next year. And certainly, as I get brochures for things like Oceania and some stuff from Azamara, they have vaccinations as kind of in their brochures covering the whole of next year. So we'll certainly have to see how that plays out. But certainly, I guess a lot of it will hinge on what we see happening over this winter that we're heading in. So that's the same point. Josh saying we're due on a cruise in September. Any news if we'll need to be vaccinated? I think again we will not find that out until close to time. What I'm seeing lines doing is having kind of a rolling policy. So some are rolling them. So for example, we saw Cunard. They basically announced right through to, I think it was May the 22nd, if I remember correctly. It might have been April the 22nd, but some, basically into the first quarter, we saw them rolling their vaccination policy. As I mentioned, we saw Holland America, and it was Princess, rolling it into January. I've seen what Royal Caribbean do is region by region. They sort of will announce the protocols for a certain month ahead of time. So I think certainly for September next year, Josh, we will only find that out, X amount of time ahead, maybe a quarter ahead or so. So we will see. And I guess it all hinges around, I guess, how things play out. So I'm going to go back and make sure I haven't missed any. Let me just pick up on this one. So Irish in the USA joining, lots of people joining it that I apologize if I haven't shouted out. Paul, I've heard some bad reports about airport delays in Europe for passengers returning from fly cruises. Is this likely to continue as passenger numbers rise? Paul, it seems to be very hit and miss. So will it, as passengers number rise? It may do. What I think we're seeing a lot is, you're absolutely right, I've seen as well lots of issues. So we had, for example, flying into Greece for our Seaborne Ovation, we had a massive big queues. It took us quite a long time. In the end, it only took 45 minutes. It felt like forever to get through. I've seen other people, particularly come out of Barcelona, Spain, checking and moving through, being extremely slow. In the UK, people coming back have really struggled based on what has to be checked or not checked by hand. So I think you're right. We're going to see, as travel ramps up, these little fluctuations here and there, because other people had smooth experience through Barcelona, other people had a smooth experience even on the cruise through Greece. So I think we're going to see those fluctuations moving. What I'm seeing, I guess, hopefully that'll shift, because what I'm seeing happening more and more, particularly with airlines, is, and this is where I think the problem in Barcelona was, is certainly all the airlines flights that I've been on, the ones I've got, is you have to upload your vaccination proof and your passenger locator form, if that's required, before you can actually check in. So it's actually then verified before. Some countries or some airlines, I know Viking Cruises were using Verifly. So that's an app which also then does that job of verifying various documents. So hopefully that will speed things up. The problem I think we had in Barcelona, for example, was all those documents were being checked manually. Whereas coming out of Greece, they'd been uploaded, so there was very few people where they're having to check them manually, and so on. So I think we'll see, as countries kind of automate these things, as more recognition moves of recognizing. So, for example, the EU's officially recognized the NHS pass, so people can use the QR codes to scan through. So I think we'll see more of that, hopefully. But yes, absolutely, absolutely. So Gary's asking the question, he's selling on Scarlet Lady next weekend. What was your favorite restaurant? So I'll do a quick plug. I think you actually watched my video. So I have two videos about Virgin, Scarlet Lady, and I do talk a little bit about the restaurants there, but I will answer the question in more detail now. So I think my favorite restaurant of all was The Wake. So The Wake is their sort of steakhouse restaurant. It's a very beautiful restaurant. It feels probably the most upmarket of the restaurants that they have on board. Someone pointed out, which I hadn't appreciated at all, maybe it's because I have kind of the cruise mindset. So when I heard The Wake, I straight away think of the wake of a ship. But so many people on that video had commented about what a terrible name they thought that was for a restaurant, because of course The Wake obviously linked to funerals and that stuff. I hadn't picked that up at all. Anyway, so The Wake I thought was fantastic, Gary. The other thing I would also, I really liked Pink Gave. We get these names right. Pink Gave, which is the Mexican restaurant. I thought that was fantastic. Really liked that. I also actually bizarrely enjoyed the Galley, which is their non-buffet buffet. That's because they had things like a lot of noodle dishes, like ramen dishes. They had some Mexican food there, that kind of stuff. But I have had quite a few people commenting, saying that they were extremely frustrated and disappointed with Virgin because they found the food was a bit too the same in the Galley, which it often is. But one of the criticisms that I certainly saw a lot when I was on Scarlet Lady, and again I'm seeing a lot of comments, is that the food is, if you like kind of very simple, plain food, that's quite hard to find on the ship because everything is themed. So, for example, the other restaurant that I liked is the Italian restaurant, and my mind's gone blank on the name, which is terrible. But anyway, But the point is, if you just like really plain food, your choice, you've got to go to a steakhouse, seafood house. You can go to the galley, which has lots of kind of Asian-y kind of food. You're going to Mexican, you're going to Italian, you're going to Razzle Dazzle, which is vegetarian. It's all quite sort of funky vegetarian. But if you just want meat and 2 veg kind of stuff, simple food, that's much harder to find. So certainly, Gary, it's going to be very interesting to see how you get on with Scarlet Lady and finding out what your favorite is. And most people really like the wake, and they really like the wake buffet. I did that. I didn't do the wake buffet. I did Razzle Dazzle buffet, but certainly I would strongly recommend trying the wake also for buffet, because that's that people really rave about that. So let me do that. So lots of questions, lots of comments about the various timing of cruises, and it's fantastic to see so many people going cruises, Nations of Seas, lots of Viking, and so on. So let's talk, while we're talking about booking, not booking, cruising, not cruising. Darla, hi there, Darla. Excuse me. Is it better to book your next cruise while on a cruise? So there's 2 schools of thought here. There's one school of thought that believe in it extremely strongly. And certainly, Darla, if there is a line, if you're on a particular cruise line that you really do like, and you know that you're going to want to cruise with them again, and you plan to cruise in the next year, 2 years, or sometimes 3 or 4 years, then the answer is probably yes. And the reason that I'm saying yes is you'll normally find there's some additional promotions on board. So you'll often find you'll get extra onboard credit or lower deposits or whatever, but often there's some kind of incentive or a discount. Now, it's worth having a look at the range of that kind of degree of discount. Now, what a lot of cruise lines will do is they will allow you to put down this lower deposit, a small deposit, $500 or $300 or whatever. But then you don't have to choose a specific cruise, and you can use it within X amount of time. So when we were on Seabourn, for example, you could actually use it within, I think it was 4 years. And if you didn't use it, you were refunded it. So that, there was not a lot to lose there, I guess, other than cash flow. And they had an additional 5% discount. Now, we actually, though, worked out actually the 5% discount, although obviously it's nice, it probably wasn't really worth handing over the $500 you had to pay for a deposit at that time. But I've seen some other really great promotions with really nice onboard credit. So I tend to look at the ones that have nice onboard credit. Now, some other pluses of booking on a cruise is even if you booked on the cruise, you can allocate that booking to your travel agent back home. So, if you're booking with Gary, or like I booked with Sarah Bolton, I can still book on the cruise, but Sarah then gets the the cruise, or Gary, if he's your travel agent, and they then get the various commissions and things, because they're doing all the follow-up stuff. So that's the kind of the one school of thought. The other school of thought is actually, you're not really going to make the discounts are not that incredible. They're not that amazing, and you don't really know if you're going to want to cruise with them. You might find, actually, go home, do your research. You can find a similar cruise on a similar or better cruise line for less than the money you would have saved. So it's really balancing out. So if you're a big fan of a cruise line, you absolutely know you want to go. The other thing that I found, and I don't know whether this is just a quirk of what I did, Darla, is they often have good insight or access into what cabins are available, the number of cabins booked. So they can often help you with that cabin choice. And of course, if you're on the same ship and you're looking at a different grade, you're an inside looking at ocean view, or you're thinking of going to suite or whatever, there is a chance, if the ship isn't full, that they may be able to show you one of those cabins. So you also get, kind of to see it firsthand. So that's the thing. I think a lot of people book on a cruise, and it's interesting because when I was on, I think it was on Seabourn, or was it? No, when I was on Celebrity, I think it was Celebrity Silhouette. They had this thing where you could book if you were traveling in a suite, or I think in the Acca grade, you could have specific bookings, which the priority bookings with the future cruise sales, but they wouldn't do any priority bookings on the last day, because they basically were so full with people booking cruises, because there's so many. And certainly you normally find queues of people, particularly on sea days, outside there. So hopefully that's helped you, Don. I don't know if I've helped or kind of hinted there, but hopefully that's answered that's answered your question. So let's take a look there and see what I have missed. Lots of Halloween, of course, happening. So let's have a look. Mariana Romero, thank you for the videos. I want to try Virgin Voyages, but I'm not sure about safety. What's your opinion on anti-COVID measures? How about the embarkation to disembarkation risk? Okay, so I guess, Marianne, you're talking about the COVID safety. I'm assuming that you're talking linked to that. So certainly with Virgin, they are following the vaccinated policy, as far as I'm aware. And they have a COVID testing approach. So they have a very similar approach to everybody else. And certainly on board, though, they are then operating, from what I've seen within the UK, on a vaccinated basis. So you don't have to wear a mask. Not a strict social distancing and so on. Of course, that may change based on requirements, etc., where they're going. They had staggered embarkation and disembarkation. They got a lot of criticism when they're in the UK for the way they handled embarkation and the testing process. Certainly when they started up in Miami, they didn't get it right. But I've seen lots of comments how they've kind of sped up that whole process. So certainly in terms of Virgin Voyages, I think you'll find it's pretty similar to other cruise lines because they're kind of having to follow the very similar rules. So I wouldn't be too concerned from that perspective. So hopefully that's answered. Now I will try and pronounce Milijalo Makanovic. Apologize if I got that wrong. When will unvaccinated crew be able to be back on a ship? I don't know the answer to that, but I suspect you'll find not for a very long time. I'm just guessing, because one of the things that certainly the cruise lines have pushed, partly because many of the regions they're selling and required, is that seafarers, both on cruise ships and on commercial ships, need to be vaccinated. And I guess that's because they're worried about problems on board, catching, falling ill, coming into port, all that kind of stuff. So certainly there's been no indication that there's a lot of energy to not have anything other than vaccinated crew. But I don't know that. I'm just seeing what I'm seeing in terms of, cruise lines make a big point about crew being vaccinated. So I suspect it may be a way off, but I don't know. One of the things that I can suggest is if you follow a site, both on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, or the website Crew Center, so Crew CREW dash Center, spelled US way, CENTER.com, or on Facebook. They are a great resource for everything crew. It's run by crew members. So certainly they will, if there's any kind of rumors or whatever around there, they will, someone there will know, both in terms of recruiting practices, if any cruise lines are recruiting crew without vaccinated, non-vaccinated, and so on. But that's my sense, is you'll find that that fairly difficult to do. So let me go back. I think there's let's go back to cruising. People are talking too much about vaccinations. I think it's the point someone's making. So let's have a look at some questions. Okay, Ryan, do my first cruise with a balcony cabin. Have done inside cabins on previous cruises. If you're out on the balcony for a while, should you keep the door closed while you're outside? Ryan, great question. So the cruise lines do ask you. So first of all, hopefully you'll enjoy a balcony cabin. I think the danger with the balcony cabin is once you've been on a balcony, it's very hard not to have a balcony, in my view. I know some people think differently, but generally speaking, I think once you've had a balcony, it's just fantastic being out there, when you're sailing, coming into port, coming out of port, and so on. So if you're on the balcony, should you keep the door closed? So the cruise lines actually ask you to keep the door closed for a couple of reasons. One of which is just because the air conditioning kind of goes a little bit into overdrive when the door's open, because it's kind of madly trying to do whatever. The other thing that is important is if you have the balcony door open and someone opens your cabin door, it creates kind of like this wind tunnel effect with this like crazy like wind everywhere and stuff. So it can be pretty like blow everything around in your cabin. So people do ask you not to. I do know people who like to leave the cabin door, the balcony door open when they sleep and stuff. But certainly that's what the cruise lines ask you to do. So Bookhaven, hi Gary, love your videos. Great to hear. Regarding cruise changes, COVID in Russia is worrying now. Certainly the numbers seem very high at the moment. It was quite scary, the numbers. If St. Petersburg was dropped from a Baltic cruise we've booked, would you see that as a major change? Me personally, absolutely, because one of the key reasons people go on the Baltic cruise is to get into St. Petersburg. And normally, of course, there's multiple nights. You know, most cruises, you're spending a minimum of 2 nights, many have 3 nights. So I think one could argue that I suspect the cruise lines would probably see that as being a major change, and I guess they're going to try and resist that. So I think, you know, again, I don't know what their perspective would be. It would be interesting if cruise lines were unable to go into St. Petersburg. I think that would put a lot of question marks on the Baltic cruise, because they know that that's the reason people are going. Very interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that. I'm due to do a Baltics cruise next year. I think it's July-ish time. So we'll see. Hopefully things have calmed down there. I guess Baltic cruises won't be running again until the summer. But I think you're right. It's if there's something really absolutely fundamental to the whole cruise and what the cruise is about would be key. So let's go to, here we are. Alex, can you now do your own tours on shore or have to go on the cruises excursions? So let me just have a little slurp. So Alex, the answer to this is it depends. So we're seeing more and more and more ability to do your own touring in port. However, it does depend entirely on the destination. So there have been situations, for example, in Europe, where if a cruise was going, let's just say, from Greece to Italy to Spain, you were able to do self-touring in Greece, but you weren't able to do self-touring in Italy. The same is true in parts of the Caribbean, and it chops and changes. So in parts of the Caribbean, you might be on an itinerary where you could self-tour in some ports, couldn't self-tour in other ports. So it's a little bit choppy and changing, and normally it hinges around what the various destinations are saying. So it seems you're more able to than less able to, but you're absolutely right. It's a good watch out. You kind of need to check. However, you also need to understand, I guess, that it may change based on what the destinations are doing, and again, how it all plays out. So, for example, when I went on, I think it was a celebrity cruise. When we went on, before we got on, we were going to have to go on cruise line excursions. By the time we got on, so everyone had to book their cruise line excursions. But by the time we got on, it was lifted, and we were able to do self-touring. So it does absolutely, kind of chop and change. So Duke is Decky Schwartz. Do you know if cruise lines will accept passengers who've been vaccinated with a Chinese vaccine like Sinopharm? I haven't seen any, and I don't know 100%, but most of the cruise lines talk about, and again, it depends a little bit on the region, what is being accepted within that jurisdiction, I guess, is also if the CDC is accepting it, they're more likely to be accepting it. If the CDC is not accepting it, they won't. So, for example, this is not about the cruise, but it does impact on cruises, is the CDC on their list of have, for people going in after the 8th of November, have accepted, of course, all of the US approved vaccines, but also WHO approved vaccines. So that includes things like AstraZeneca. And then also because some mixed doses have been approved, mixed doses of the type that's approved. So I think a lot of it hinges, again, where you're cruising, and also what the regulations are around there, what's being accepted. So again, it chops and changes. So we saw some cruise lines not accepting any mixed vaccines. Now they're accepting mixed vaccines. So again, it's one of those things that keeps changing, keeps evolving, and unfortunately, staying on top of it and the changing rules is going to be absolutely key. I guess one of the critical points is, if you're booking a cruise and one has a vaccine that's currently not accepted, you're going to have to proceed with caution. Of course, because you also have to watch the cancellation policies around that. Generally speaking, if the vaccine policy hasn't adapted, you normally have a strong case for refunds and so on and so forth. Leanne, has been upgraded to an aft cabin, but I'm concerned about engine noise and vibration, wondering what your opinion is. So, Leanne, it depends a little bit what size ship you're on. I wouldn't worry overly about it. There are a lot of people who would kind of bite your arm, or what the saying is, to get that cabin in the aft of it. So if you're on a small ship, you may have some vibration, not massively so. The same as if you're in the front of the ship, you may have more kind of movement and stuff. Certainly, one of the things you may have more of is movement, because obviously ships, if you have rough seas, you know that's why you go midships if you're concerned about seasickness or whatever. So you're always going to be more have less movement in the middle of the ship. So it depends a little bit on the ship. Certainly, in my experience, it's never been a massive issue on the ship, but it does vary. It does vary. I wouldn't be overly concerned. The other thing I would say, if you are concerned, Leanne, is why don't you go into whatever ship, say it's Holland America, New Statendam, or whatever the ship is, go into Cruise Critic, your Cruise Critic site, and go into the reviews. Just have a look, because they do specifically ask people to do reviews. So go into, say, New Statendam, go into New Statendam reviews and look at the little thing you can click there for cabins, and have a quick check through there. They might even have someone very specific for your cabin. That's one way of doing it. Or, which might be quicker, is go into Cruise Critic and go into the forums, go into whatever it is, Holland America, just post a question there. Has anyone stayed in an aft cabin, on deck, whatever, on New Statendam? What was the vibration like? And the chances are extremely high that someone will have done that, and they will reply and let you give you the lowdown on your very specific deck and cabin. So that's what I would do if you were the slightest bit concerned. Beth, Eagle Eyes, do I see a new book behind it? It's actually, I put this here. I'll tell you the story about the book. There's two things about the book. One of the reasons I put the books here is my unit here. It's got these horrible stain marks here. Got like something was on here and it's taken the varnish off, and I haven't fixed it. So I put this here to hide it. And I just took my bookshelf. But this is a book. It's not a new book, but I'll do a plug anyway without showing. So it's called The Cruise Traveler's Handbook. It's quite old now. It's done in 2014 or 2015, I think. And it was a series of travelers' handbooks. And I was asked to do the cruise version of it. So they had like a solo traveler. They had career break travelers, family travel, and so on. And so I was asked to do the cruise one. So that's it. So the real reason it's here is I'm not trying to promote a book, although just it's to cover up a mark that was bugging me when I was looking at the screen. But yes, it is a book, and it's on Amazon if you're interested in that. And in fact, that actual book, a PDF version, is one of the perks in the channel membership thing. But yes, it's a book. I should be pushing the book more. I was embarrassed to try and push things, but it is there. I need to actually go and look back at it to make sure it's not massively out of date. Beth asked a question. So she's on Western Caribbean. All ports can go ashore. I think I'm right in saying that it's more once you get down to Barbados and stuff that they are more strict. So let's have a look. Here we go. Michael, I've seen some comments about a distributing commentator. I'll try and see who that is and do something about that in a second. Michael, do you use a travel agent or book direct, and why do you do it? So Michael, great question. I get asked this quite often, and it's a really key question, I think, around going direct or with a travel agent. So me personally, I book through a travel agent. So I booked through Sarah Bolton, who is she works like she's a home travel agent, but it's part of a group called Travel Councils, which is sort of a big travel group specializing on cruising. So I didn't used to use a travel agent. When I first started cruising, I used a travel agent. Then I started booking myself, partly because I liked all the putting packages together and booking my own flights and lots of stuff. And I actually shifted to a travel agent, partly because I used to realize in one of my videos I spoke about lots of the pros of using a travel agent. And I thought, well, it's a bit hypocritical that I'm talking about the pros and not doing it myself. So, and also I started doing it more in the run-up to COVID, actually just before COVID. So the reasons I use a travel agent is as follows. First of all, it will never cost you anything more than going direct. So certainly that's the current situation. Now, I know there is some trend in some places where you may pay a travel agent a fee to do some planning for you, but generally speaking, in most places, the travel agent earns a commission from the price of the trip. And cruise lines do not undercut travel agents. So unlike if you book, say, a hotel, Hilton will always make a point is, if you book through us, it's always cheaper. That's not true of cruising. Cruise lines do not undercut travel agents because actually, certainly today, the vast bulk of their bookings come through travel agents. And travel agents are really, really important in terms of helping drive new to cruise and also helping, getting people to try different cruise lines and that kind of stuff, and helping people choose the right cabin and almost doing that whole consulting thing. So certainly you're never going to pay more than you go direct, and sometimes you may even pay less because of various discounts or promotions that cruise lines may end up doing through a travel agent. Secondly, you have one point of contact. So the travel agent can bundle everything for you. So they can bundle flights, hotels, transfers, and all that kind of stuff. And it's one point of contact. You don't have to do anything. So, for example, I'll give you an example. Next year, as I'm doing an Alaska trip, but I'm doing some pre-stays and post-stays. I want to use a train to get from Anchorage to Whittier, where the train goes, where the ship goes from, and all that kind of stuff. And I want transfers and blah, blah, blah. I haven't do any of that. Sarah's looked at all the options, giving the choices, and I've just say yes, no, blah, blah, blah. And thirdly, also what I found during COVID is if there is a problem or an issue, you have one point of contact. So I've had loads of people contact me saying, oh, they're going crazy because they book direct or they book via an online booking service and they can't get hold of them, they can't get customer service, blah, blah, blah. For me, I can get hold of Sarah by drop her an email, give her a call, she's always there, and I just have to talk to one person. So all the chopping and changing that went on has basically happened. Fourthly, and this is a UK specific thing, so I don't know how it applies elsewhere, but also by booking through a travel agent, puts a package together. It's what's known as atoll protected in the UK. Now, I don't know what the equivalent is in Australia, the US, or whatever. And that basically means if anyone through that system goes bust, including the travel agent, that I would be covered. So separate to whole travel insurance thing, there's a whole other thing that protects the whole package and so on. And also, for example, because I booked through a travel agent I'll give you an example, because I booked through Polar Routes, I booked my Antarctica, the specialist things I use specialist agency for. If the Foreign Office in the UK was not allowing me to travel, they would have had to found me an alternative, even if the cruise line was saying we're sailing and you have to do it. So those are some of the key reasons. Also, what I find is often cruise lines, particularly if you're looking for short deals, close to sailing time, they often will push things through travel agents because they, if they've got a ship which has lots of cabins they need to sell, and they may push those promotions through travel agents because they don't want to start advertising them, because they get, what I always recommend is watch the fares, check the fares. If you see it going down, go back to the cruise line last one to go down. So often you'll find they might do more promotions and things through there. They often know very early when things are going on sale. So for example, what they'll do is they might do a pre-release. Say if Cunard are putting all their world cruises or whatever on sale, they'll often pre-release those and brief all the agents on those before they're going to go public with them. So what I found, for example, is when things went on sale, if there's really popular things, say a maiden voyage or some big, new ships coming on or something, is if you try and book direct through the website or through direct, what I found is you can get caught up in that whole, you're in a queue, whatever. What I found has worked for me anyway, and it is true travel agents, is when some stuff was going on sale, Sarah actually managed to get in before, because she has a direct line into the cruise line, who have a whole separate system for booking travel agents. She was able to get me actually even before it officially had opened, minutes before it was open. So hopefully that answers it. Michael, I do have a video somewhere on the channel about booking through a travel agent, which probably is a little bit more eloquent than this and goes into more detail. So if you just take a look at, if you go to the channel, if you search even Tips for Travelers and cruise agent, then hopefully that'll come up and that'll go into more detail, hopefully. Let's have a look. Post comment. I'm not anyway. So sorry if I missed the argument above and I can't see the point because I can mute people and things. So hopefully I'll try and go back and have a look at that and block that. I don't normally have a moderator. Maybe I should have a moderator in here. Maybe I'll look at that as we move ahead. Sorry, Coach Tony M. Let me have a little slurp. With Lumini and Celebrity Epics being part of a package, should we save our money on specialty dining options, or is there one that really stands out? That is a great question. Great question. Something that I really wrestled with as well. So let me just give a little bit of insight to people who don't know what we're talking about. So Lumini is the restaurant that's associated with the Retreat, as it's now known, which is the suite experience. So on Celebrity, they have the Retreat Lounge, they have a Retreat Deck, they have their own restaurant, Lumini. Now, I personally, Coach Tony M, I think the food in Lumini is amazing. It's phenomenal. I did go to some of the specialty dining, but to be honest with you, I went because I wanted to cover it more for the channel than for myself. And I felt kind of I was paying for food, which is, it's great. But actually, the food in Lumini it's a beautiful restaurant. The food was amazing. The service was incredible. So I thought I was kind of paying to eat when I didn't really need to. So my point of view would be, if you want to have a special event, if it's a special anniversary, a wedding, maybe a birthday, or just you want to do something a little bit different, then a specialty restaurant is the way to go. And generally speaking, I would tend to lean towards the steakhouse kind of approach. Now, is it called? It's called on Apex on Apex, called something different to it is on Solstice Class. Mine's gone blank. But the reason I said it is, although you can get kind of steak stuff in Lumini occasionally, that is kind of it's different because you get your steaks and your sauces and your all that stuff. That's something I would do if you're really a big steak a big steak fan. That's what I would do. I want to pick up. Sorry, I just slipped that. I saw the point about it links to one of the things I'd said in my recent video, and it went and slipped. Suddenly the questions went. Here we go. And I saw someone had answered this one because it links to something. So Julie is answered. Hi there, Julie. Do you think it's better to explore many different cruise lines or to earn loyalty from one line? Sorry if you've answered this before. So Julie, I have my video from last week, I think it was, which talks about kind of some critical but slightly unusual way of cruising advice, touches on this one, and it's about staying loyal to a line and kind of not knowing what you're missing out on. So I think there's nothing wrong with earning loyalty from a line. However, what I learned, I'll talk about my experience, is I learned that I didn't realize what I was missing out on by sticking to one line. So I now have a little portfolio of line. Now I probably go on more lines because I want to cover more lines for the channel. But one of the things I would say is it's a bit like you don't know what you don't know. So if the loyalty program is phenomenal and you love the line and you just think it's just too high a risk and you want that next level because you want the free laundry or the Wi-Fi or the free cruise or whatever, there's nothing wrong with staying loyal. And I know people who are incredibly loyal. However, do take a look at other lines because once tastes change over time. What I learned, I guess, is I started off only going on P&O cruises, and I kind of thought, okay, this is what cruising is about, and I kind of accepted that, and I enjoyed it. Then I went on to Cunard, and it was like, oh my goodness, this is so much better. This is so much different. Here's a whole bunch of things they do completely differently that I didn't know that I actually liked even more. And then I made the mistake, certainly I think for a long time, of going on Cunard and never trying something else. Then I suddenly went on smaller ships and Scott, actually, I really love that whole small ship experience. I'm going into lots of little quirky ports, and I actually like the fact there's no lines and no queues, and the service is so much more attentive. And then I kind of went on Celebrity and think, wow, I really like Celebrity because it's a more contemporary version of what sort of Cunard do, but they've got a new spin on it. It still feels very upmarket. They've got the nice retreat area. They've got the aqua class. They've got this. They do the entertainment very differently. So that's the thing I would say is do a little bit of experimentation. Sort of try a little bit else, but be really clear about what it is that's really important to you. And my learning was, I'm evolving. I'm changing all the time. My tastes are changing, and also the lines are sort of changing. So I would say, give one or two lines another go, give them a try. And I think certainly what I learned is you just find so much. I'm trying to think if I've ever been on a line that I really thought I'd wasted my money on. And the only one is actually, which I talk about in the video, to be honest, Julie, is I went back to the line that I started with, and that was a bad idea. So going back to a line that wasn't a great success is a bad idea. Let's kind of keep moving forward. So I don't know if I've answered that properly, Julie, but I would give it a try. And I think as Jeffrey said earlier in his question is, are these loyalty programs as incredible, as they could be, and are they changing? So for example, I'll just use an example, Julie, is we built up this huge loyalty on Cunard. We have, I think, Diamond, whatever the top one is, Diamond. But actually, we get all this Wi-Fi and blah, 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 and a few bits and pieces. But actually, I can go on Celebrity, or I can go on Viking, or these other lines. And a lot of those things that I've spent all those years building as loyalty are actually standard. So that's also, I think, a key thing is look at what you're earning from loyalty and getting a stand. You can actually get for standard for not much more. That was the thing that I thought I realized. I was obsessed with going up the loyalty, but actually, whoa, they were doing it anyway, and that without having loyalty. Janet's saying, here we are. So hopefully it's good plug for that that thing. Scott, I want to touch on Scott's point. Hopefully ships will start having some more solar cabins. I agree with you. This is a big point. Now the good news is, Scott, that is happening. Maybe not as fast as we would like it to happen, but we're pretty much seeing that all new ships, with the exception of ultra luxury ships, when they come out, are putting in more and more solar cabins. So I'll just use the Celebrity example. Celebrity went from having none on Solstice Class 2, I think it was 4 on Silhouette, to, I can't remember the exact number, so please don't quote me on the number, but something like 20 on Apex and Edge, and they're having, like, if I remember correctly, 32 on Beyond. Holland America went from having very few to having more and more and more. So we're seeing certainly the bigger ship lines having more of those on. Now, Scott, what I do have, so I'll have a bit of a plug here, is on my website, tipsfortravelers.com. I've got a little tab, which is called, I think it's called Solo Cabins, or something like Solo Cruise Ship Solo Cabins, where I'm starting to build a list of the cruise lines and the ships that have solo cabins. And I'm trying to update it every quarter or so with those. So hopefully that'll also help you kind of zero in on those. But I agree with you. I think we'll see more of it. I think there's a growing recognition by cruise lines that there are different permutations, same as some cruise lines, going more for families and building more family cabins. But solo is growing so fast, and there's such a big push for more and more solo cabins. So I think that's right. Michael, I don't know what PCCs are. I probably should. PCCs. If it comes to my, I will do it. Or maybe you can say what that is. I think I'm going to run out of time. So let me do the SMCH. I booked on Viking to Hawaii on December the 20th. No excursions or dining reservations have been loaded yet. Shouldn't be worried the trip will be cancelled. It's unusual. So we're on 20th. It's extremely unusual for Viking not to have uploaded those. Now, it could, now excursions not so. No dining reservations, they release based on grade of ship. It is very unusual. So I would certainly start pushing them much more if you haven't if you haven't heard. But it is unusual. I'm trying to think the normal time period. It does seem very very, very short. But Hawaii is open, so I can't see any reason why it should be cancelled. But definitely it is unusually short. Right, we've churned through a whole hour already, and unfortunately, I think I've answered most questions, not all of the questions, and I might have missed some. So thanks also. Here we are, personal cruise consultant. Sorry. So, okay. So I don't know the answer to that specifically. I will have a look at that and maybe talk about it more next time. That very specific question about different cruise lines. So thanks so much for joining. We will be back next Saturday. It will be the last live stream for until December. So join me please next week. I'll talk about more about Antarctica trip, and then we'll have a bit of a break because I'll be away basically for nearly three or four weekends. Thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate you joining. Hopefully I've answered your questions. I will have a think and look and see if I can sort of the moderator issue. Video comes out tomorrow night. It's all about ultra luxury cruising. And so please take a look at that tomorrow. Have a great rest of your weekend. Take care. Have a great, happy, do you have a happy, unhappy Halloween?